It is 1 o'clock. I would like to call this meeting of the Douglas County Planning Commission to order. We have a quorum and Commissioner Mark Gardner is absent. Then Rip. Sorry, Mark. Would you all please join me in the pledge? I asked Kirk to lead us.
Please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At least I didn't take Mark Gardner's name in vain. Now we will have opening public comment. I would like to say prior to public comment that we will only be taking comment on items that are not on our agenda and reserve speaking on those items until they are called. If content is disruptive or disrespectful to commissioners, staff members, or members of the public, the individual speaking will be asked to stop and to sit down. When you come to the microphone, please write your name on the list and you will have 3 minutes to make your comment. First speaker, please. Seeing no one rise, I will close public comment. Oh, David.
Yeah, I've been asked to make a couple of statements regarding my activity with the VHR initiative, and so that's what I'm going to do at this point. I have 4 items I'd like to address. The first is the initiative process. The initiative process is that we go out and ask people to sign an initiative to place something on the ballot. That initiative never comes to this board. It only goes to the Board of County Commissioners. They'll decide whether to go forward with the initiative, put it on the ballot, or to put it into effect immediately once the signatures are gathered. But it never comes to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission does hear things that come in from the VHR committee. And I have been consistent in my voting on these issues. In my opinion, the VHR committee has tried hard to make VHRs as much as long-term rentals as possible, which is part of their mandate. My votes on this issue have been consistent in keeping with my duties as a planning commissioner, and I will continue to do so. Third one, I believe that all codes currently on the books should be enforced, and I do not believe that I have ever knowingly broken any of them. Sometimes our duties require deciding whether or not those codes would be changed. We all have different opinions on these issues, and I will continue to voice my opinion based on my current and researched answers to these questions. The fourth issue, on 1 or 2 occasions, I spoke on the VHR initiative. I also allowed Danny Tarkanian to place my name in his newsletters regarding the VHR initiative. I have done this as a private citizen of the United States of America. It was wrong of me because I should have made it more apparent that I was speaking as a private citizen and not as a member of the Douglas County Planning Commission, which I will try to do consistently from now on. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Is there anyone else for a public comment? Seeing no one rise, I will bring comment back to the planning commissioners. Is there any discussion among planning commissioners regarding David's statement? I do have a couple things I would like to say, David, if I may. Every year, I bring forward the Public Planning Commission bylaws because for me, there is a public trust issue with the Planning Commission, and that public appearance is everything. And very important to me is that planning commissioners disclose when speaking before any board, commission, or in public that they are speaking as an individual and not as a member of the Planning Commission. There was a conflict with the prior planning commissioner that I had to speak with him on a few occasions, as did our district attorney, and he eventually got to where he would, before he spoke before the Board of Commissioners, identify himself as an individual. And while it took a while, he did, sometimes sarcastically, but he did identify as an individual. And he made that very clear no matter who he was speaking in front of. And you have not only avoided doing that, you have identified at the last VHR meeting on August 23rd that you were a current member of the Planning Commission. And that causes me distress. And when you say you will try to make it clear speaking as a citizen, that causes me some distress because it should not be try, it should be I will. And I think the public deserves better. I think the public from us, they depend upon us to speak as planning commissioners when we are here and as citizens when we are not seated here. And that needs to be very clear. There are several instances, and I appreciate you stating that you should have made it clearer with Danny that you were speaking as a private citizen. I really appreciate that. But there are so many instances, not only with the VHRs, but in the Debt Management Commission meeting as well, where the opportunity to speak as an individual was there and it was not made clear. And I am concerned that this is going to be a habit hard to break. So I need to make it clear that the general responsibilities that are found in our bylaws and in the ethics training that we receive from Doug Ritchie in the DA's office, that those may not be abided by. And I need very strong reassurance that while you are a planning commissioner, that it's going to be more than a try. Is there any more comment from planning commissioners? Seeing none, we will resume our meeting. We will go to approval of the agenda. Are there any comments or changes to be made by planning commissioners?
I have an issue on my vote on the the Art in the Public Place program plan. My voice was not heard.
We are on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, first on the agenda. Is there any change to the agenda? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second? Second by Paul. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Now, approval of the minutes. Do we have changes? Ken?
Yes. The program, the Art in Public Places program plan, and my voice was not heard in that vote, and I would like to vote no on the amended version. The original version, I'm for.
AJ, can he change his vote?
AJ Haynes from the DA's office for the record. It's my understanding he's not changing his vote. He's just clarifying what his vote was. He's just making an amendment to the minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have that? Okay. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of the last meeting with Ken's notation that his vote was not recorded and he chose to vote nay on the Arts in the Park agenda
Do
item.
we have a second?
Second.
Second by David. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We will now move to item 1, Read it into the record for possible action. Discussion on the following requests. 1, Plan Development PD Tentative Subdivision Map, Application DP 23-0090, requesting 2A establish a PD overlay zone for a 33.20 acre residential subdivision site, allowing for the reduction in lot size, width, and setbacks, and B, subdivide 33.20 acres into 85 single-family residential lots, the smallest being 8,000 square feet with 7.86 acres of open space. And 2, zoning map amendment ZMA application DP 23-0091, requesting to change the zoning designation from FR 19 to SFR 12,000. The subject property is located at the northeast corner of Main River and Dresslerville Roads in the FR 19 zoning district in the Gardnerville Ranchos Community Plan and is designated as receiving area. The applicant is Ranchos LLC, Keith Serpa and Sam Davis, and the applicant's representative is Karen Downs, Manhart Consulting. APN 1220-15-701-001. Lucille Rayo, Senior Planner, presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Lucille Rayo, Community Development. Madam Chair, the applicant has requested a continuance to this item. So we're asking that you continue with the vote on the continuance. You can also hear the item or deny it.
Questions from the commission? No? Since this is for possible action, I need to open it for public comment. I would ask those who wish to speak for public comment that this item will be continued to our next Planning Commission meeting on October 10th. For those who cannot make our October 10th meeting, you can make your public comment now. However, I would encourage those who can make the October 10th meeting to come to that meeting and make your public comment then, because it's better if we hear your comments then. You are entitled, though, to make your comments at both meetings. Please write your name on the list if you do come for public comment. Please make your comments at the microphone. Write your name on the list.
My name is Gabrielle Widener. I'm sorry? My name is Gabriella Widener. Is that better? Okay. I just had 2 comments on the proposal. It concerns me that it doesn't look like the traffic impact would be considered for the second US 395 southbound entrance to that development through the reservation. And I don't know if anybody studied the impact would occur if the reservation gated their access to 395, so it would impact traffic on Dresslerville and on Long Valley Road, because there's a lot of people that go through the reservation to take the southbound 395 exit, as well as there is a lot of ATV and other recreational vehicles that come in from 395 on that road, on Main River Road, to get access to the public lands. The second comment I have is I wasn't sure whether the water and sewer impacts had been considered, because there's already low flow on the water, and I don't know how much impact those additional homes would have on that. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
For the record, Jeannie Shizuru. I own the property at the corner of South Riverview and Dresslerville, and some of you may be aware that we had a flash flood situation on the March 9th flooding event, And so we have pictures and we have a lot of personal experience of the direction, the downhill direction northward that happened in that area. Now, if they put a development in there, obviously that's a stopping point of sorts in these houses' properties. And in their plan, it looks like they are putting a retention pond behind our property. But because this flooding was so dramatic, was so gigantic, that however the waters might go from outside of this development, as it comes towards the development, and whether it's going to end up on the road, there was very little water that went on Dresslerville because it stopped at the back of our property. So however the water might meander, let's say outside of the retention pond and onto the road, would be a very interesting thing for us as that property right there to see if there could be any leakage from the road instead of the ground, the flash flood ground, that the water could come onto the road and into our property. So I would really like to be involved in all the discussions about flood mitigation on this development. And the people who might be buying these properties need to have some kind of understanding of the pattern that was so obvious and graphic during this flooding event, especially the people that are up near the main road, the main Indian Road. If their properties are there, because that's where the water flash floods from, or to the side, this is a very significant flooding place which you would not expect. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Humphreys. I live on Porter Court, down at the south end of the Carson Valley Golf Course, and addressing what the previous person talked about. When there is serious flooding, snow melt, or whatever like that, it drains from that upper property that you are talking about down across the Washoe Reservation, and then it drains down the south corner of my yard down to the lower golf course. I have not looked and I have not seen the maps or the plans yet, other than the one that was sent out in our letter, about where that water flow is going to be in the future. I don't back up exactly to that new development area. I am down the hill from it a little bit, but I am also affected by the flooding and the drainage from that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Sherry Andrews. My husband and Al live on the corner of South Riverview and Meadowview. We have a 2-acre parcel there overlooking the golf course. We have several concerns. One, along with the other two of the three speakers regarding the flooding or water. Secondly, would be where is the water going to be coming from for these homes? Our area, we are in the original ranchos. We are still on our own septic tanks. And so that's a concern, the water. The other concern is the traffic. There's a lot of traffic going not only on Long Valley, Dresslerville, South Riverview, Fairway, as well as Riverview. So there's a big concern there. There's only a few ways, as I think most people know, that are in that area to get in and out. So not only traffic any fire protection, police activity, etc. The tribal lands, of course, are a concern, as mentioned, and the cost of the homes and the size of the homes. The area we're in are kind of the higher dollar homes, and we're concerned about that, especially we've got the larger lots. So if these are going to be 8,000 square feet, I feel like it's cramming a very small development into an area that's really not necessary. There's the whole area past us on Dresslerville and, Dresslerville, Centerville, all of those seem to be the larger properties. So there is concern there also. And the school children, the buses, where the schools are going to be to house these children, because there's probably going to be at least one child, possibly more in each home. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one rise, I will close public comment and reserve comments to the commission. I would like to reassure the public that there will be additional traffic studies done for this area, and your questions will be taken under advisement and answered for the next public hearing in October. And are there any comments that the commission would like to make? David?
Yeah, I want to state for the record that I own a lot that backs this also, and it's an 1.5 acre lot. And to show that this is consistently where I have stood, when the Sierra Vista project came in at the other end of this track, I mentioned conformity to the track that it was adjacent to. And we mentioned the size of the lots that were going to go in. It went back to planning, and they came back with a more compatible plan with larger lots backing those lots that they were trying to build really small lots up against larger lots. And I notice in the record here, it doesn't mention the larger lots almost anywhere in this presentation. They're all 1.48 acres or larger. And there's a couple that are 2 acres on the far east end of South Riverview. So I think that the Planning Commission should take a little more care in the conformity issue and make sure that this is conforming with the rest of the neighborhoods there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So, any more comments? Seeing none, Bryce, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to just take a moment to thank the public that spoke today. If you aren't able to make it, or if you are able to make it back, we encourage you to come back on the 10th. We're always interested and respect your comments, and so I encourage you to come back and share those. For now, I would move to continue the request to discuss Item 1, Plan Development PD Tentative Subdivision Map, TSM, Application DP 23-0090, and 2, Zoning Map Amendment, ZMA, Application DP 23-0091 to the next Planning Commission meeting, which will be held on October 10th, 2023 at 1 p.m. in the Douglas County Commissioner Meeting Room at the Historic Courthouse, 1616 H Street, Minden, so that the applicant may add the following to their application: a traffic report with data sufficient to satisfy the requirements of Chapter 20.01.030 and Division 3.11.4.3.5 of the Douglas County Design Criteria and Improvement Standards.
Is there a second? We have a motion by Bryce and a second by David. All those in favor?
Aye.
Let's take 5 minutes so the public can file out. Unless you're willing to stay for the next item on our agenda, we'll give you 5 minutes so you can leave. I'll call this meeting back to order. For possible action, discussion on major variance application DP 23-0124, requesting 2 variances needed for the relocation of an existing freestanding sign for the Carson Valley Inn at 1627 Highway 395. First, an increase in the maximum allowable sign height from 20 feet to 26 feet. And second, an increase in the maximum allowable distance from the grade to the bottom of the sign from 2 feet to 8 feet. The sign is presently located on APN 1320-29-401-014 within the TC Tourist Commercial Zoning District. The sign will be moved to APN 1320-29-401-023 within the General Commercial Zoning District. Both parcels are in the town of Minden. The owner is Michael P. Graham, G-PEG 1 LLC and G-PEG 2 LLC, and the applicant's representative is Keith Rubin, R.O. Anderson Engineering. Lucille Rayo, Senior Planner, presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Lucille Rayo, Community Development. Let's give you a brief intro, and then I'll turn it over to Kate Cunningham from R.O. Anderson. On February 9th, 2010, the Planning Commission approved the same variance request you are hearing today. The only difference is the location. The reason for the same request is the fact that they are moving the sign, which triggered having to come back for the same request. The sign is moving approximately 888 feet east of the existing location, closer to the existing main entrance where the former Soletti's once stood. The town of Minden has approved the request at their August 8th, 2023 meeting. At this time, I'd like to introduce Kate, who has a presentation for you.
This should only take a few minutes. I'm Kate Cunningham with R.O. Anderson Engineering, representing Mike Pegram, the property owner. I'd like to thank the staff for the report, as well as the members of the Planning Commission for their review and consideration of this request. Today, the applicant, as Lucille marked out, is seeking approval to move the existing monument sign located behind Carson Valley Inn and Casino to the parking area in front of the building formerly occupied by Soletti's Restaurant. So this is an overview. It's not very visible, so I'm just going to go straight to the on the left is the current location of the sign, and in the box on the right is the new proposed location. As Lucille mentioned, that's generally where the Soletti's Restaurant was located in the past. So this is also a close-up of the existing sign, and this is right between Mavericks and the back of the building. This is where trucks park right now, and then we're moving over to a sort of a landscape island where that monument sign will be relocated. So here's a view of the location behind the building, the existing location, and here is a view of the proposed location in front of the building. And I don't have a lot more to add to this. I think it's fairly described by Lucille and I, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? Ken?
What's the reason for the relocation?
Well, they're planning to bring in a hotel behind the building. So it's my understanding. Thanks for asking.
Are they removing one of the existing hotels?
Not that I know of, no. It's a new Marriott hotel, is what I understand. Some type of Marriott. They have so many types. I don't know. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Kirk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just one question, and either Lucille or Jeremy, you'll probably be able to answer this, but we have on page 245 of the packet findings for a major variance, and the first one I think is the most important one. The applicant responded that the general reason for this finding being met is safety. Would you concur that that's a valid reason for allowing these variances to go forward?
I would agree with that, and it has been analyzed by our engineering department as far as the safety is concerned. It also was analyzed when it first came before the Planning Commission in 2010. But yes, I believe the finding has been met and can be met.
And in safety, it's basically sight lines for the traffic that it's coming up and down 395 and turning in to the facility in question. Is that correct?
Yes, and entering and exiting from the site, correct.
The lumens, the brightness of the sign, they're not going to increase?
No changes to the sign itself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since this is for possible action, I will open it for public comment. Seeing no one rise, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Are there any questions for the applicant, for staff comments? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to approve major variance application DP 23-0124, allowing for the relocation of an existing freestanding sign from APN 1320-29-401-014 to APN 1320-29-401-023 by allowing an increase in the maximum sign height from 20 feet to 26 feet, and by allowing an increase in the maximum distance from the grade to the bottom of the sign from 2 feet to 8 feet.
Second? Second by Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item 3 for possible action. Discussion on development application DP 230048, a design review for 116 townhomes in a single phase on 4 existing vacant parcels in the Monte Vista subdivision, and development application DP 230047, a request for a tentative subdivision map to create building envelopes for the townhomes and dedicated common areas on a total of 9.49 acres. The subject parcels are located on both sides of Monte Vista Avenue, located west of the Monte Vista single-family development, La Costa at Monte Vista, and approximately 730 feet north of Ironwood Drive. The subject parcels are all zoned multi-family residential MFR with a planned development PD overlay in the Nevada Northwest LLC specific plan within the Minden Community Plan area. The applicant is Keith Rubin, R.O. Anderson Engineering, representing the owner, Rye Creek LLC. APNs 1320-30510-004, 1320-30510-005, 1320-30-510-006, and 1320-30-611-001. Linda Doherty presenting.
Madam Chairman, I have a disclosure I'd like to make before the staff begins the presentation. I'd like to disclose that I received an email on September 12th from Larry Walsh, who's a member of the Minden Town Board. He acted on this item as a member of the Minden Town Board and raised 2 additional points with me that I intend to raise during the questions that we will ask of staff and the applicant. They involve TDRs and parking on Monte Vista. So I wanted to disclose that I received that information, and I will share that with everyone so they can have the benefit of that during the discussion that we have in this item.
I guess I could disclose I do live in Windhaven, which is east of this area. And I had a conversation with J.D. Frisbee last night, town manager of Minden. Any other disclosures? No. Linda.
Hi, Linda Doherty for the record. Today we're going to present to you a project for 116 townhomes as part of the approved plan development for Monte Vista at La Costa and the Nevada Northwest Specific Plan. The subject parcels were created as part of the specific plan in 2001 and the plan development in 2002. At that time, the plan development proposed 145 townhomes. Before I introduce the applicant today, I wanted to direct you to the revised staff report and supplemental information. We have a few changes from the original staff report that you got. You should all have a copy there. And I've noted page numbers where those conditions came from in the original staff report. And we can go through those if you'd like. The conditions start on page, let's see. Sorry. Oh, okay. One of the items was a last-minute change, and it will be item 2 of the conditions. And here we go. This is an engineering condition that says submit receipts from Town of Minden and Minden-Gardnerville Sanitation District. That was on page 288 of your original packet. We're going to move that condition to be with the submittal of the final map. Okay, and then this is condition 3I. We are amending that. Existing overhead utilities can remain. Any new utilities would have to go underground. Okay. And then condition
I
7.
apologize, could you repeat that again? The undergrounding is not going to take place under the new?
Any new utilities will be required to be underground. You're welcome.
And I'm sorry, ma'am, are you clarifying that these are changes that you've made to the report, that you're no longer requiring these conditions, is that correct?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next change we have is item 7, and that is under D. The town of Minden is going to provide individual trash totes, so they don't need a trash enclosure, and they are going to require concrete pads, which I believe, to keep the trash cans out of the alley. So it'll be behind, but it won't be in the driving area. So it won't cause a problem for the size, the width. Let's see, in the next one. Since it's an alley, we're not going to require pavers there. But the applicant is willing to put pavers at the entrances and exits of the alleys, if you prefer. Okay, the next is condition 19. And this is going to be something the town of Minden is going to be responsible for. So it's not a county requirement. And then, and I'm sorry, I failed to underline this, but on condition 33, we added, if the intersection improvements are not constructed, the fees contributed by the applicant shall be returned to the applicant or their heirs or assigns in accordance with NRS 278B.260. And that was on page 293 of your packet. And then, we have a few more to go. 39, condition 39. Let's see. We're going to remove A because It's not required since the right-of-way is offered for dedication. Okay, and then condition 40. A doesn't apply because these are going to be building envelopes to contain the townhomes, kind of like patio homes. Okay, and then for condition 40E, we're removing that because the town of Minden is to construct and maintain the regional stormwater mitigation. So we don't have to require that for the county. And those are the changes. Sorry, there's so many. Okay. There have been a number of public comments received for this project. Most of them were received in May, right after the item was presented before the Minden Town Board, and well before noticing for the Planning Commission meeting was sent out by staff. So that's why the dates on some of the public comments are before the noticing went out. I did verify with each of the folks that had comments whether or not they wanted those comments as part of public comment. And I think all but one did, so. Many of the homeowners were unaware that this project was previously approved. The major concerns are alley drainage, parking, and traffic. There are also concerns about building height. 35 feet is the maximum height allowed for this zoning district, which is multifamily residential. But these townhomes are proposed at either 27 feet or 28 foot 3 inches in height. So they are below what's allowed for the maximum height. It's also been brought up that because some of the La Costa homes in front of the homes in the Windhaven plan development were limited to 1 story, that it was desirable for this proposed development as well. But that requirement was part of the Nevada Northwest specific plan and only applies to that specific area and not where this project's being proposed. Any questions before I introduce the applicant?
Any questions?
No? Okay. Then I would like to introduce Keith Rubin of R.O. Anderson Engineering to present the details of this proposed development. A copy of his PowerPoint presentation has been provided to you. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. For the record, Keith Rubin, R.O. Anderson Engineering, representing the applicant today. Rye Creek LLC. I can't remember that name. I want to thank the staff for working with us closely since the middle. This project was, I know sometimes it seems these things just magically appear and no one's worked on it, but we've submitted this in April. We've been working with staff since April trying to get a project that's compliant and consistent, at least in the opinion of the staff, this level, and of course with ourselves. I think we've reached that, and I think Linda's done a great job, not only listening to us, but also responding to public comment in her role. So I want to thank her for all of her hard work. So we'll go ahead and start the presentation. And I don't know, does this clicker work here for me? Okay. So, as pointed out, this project's located in the Nevada Northwest specific plan. This was adopted in 2001. It's located in what was known as the residential planning area. It's also located in the Nevada Northwest Plan Development, which was a rezoning that occurred in 2002, which rezoned this site, particular sites, MFR/PD. There was a plan development that was done. And today's request is for approval of a new tentative map and design review, which was a condition of approval of that plan development, that we go through this process for this part of the project. And we're proposing that this will be developed as a single phase. This was also approved by the Minden Town Board on May 3rd, 2023, and we indicated to the town board that we were in agreement with all of their recommended conditions. So let's look at the master plan consistency. On the left, you can see that is the current land use, which is receiving area. Receiving area requires that for any development to occur there, you have to bring in transferable development rights. And under the approval of the specific plan and the plan development, we have to bring in, for this proposal, 116 transferable development rights, one for every unit. On the right is the current zoning, which is multifamily residential PD overlay. That multifamily residential zoning has been in place since the PD was approved in 2002, or excuse me, 2004. This is a page of the updated page of the Nevada Northwest specific plan that shows the current development, particularly for the commercial and the single family that's west of Ironwood Drive. Our project versus project location, those were townhomes, as was identified in both the specific plan and the plan development that these would be townhomes. There was a density of 145 townhomes approved with mitigation measures for traffic based on that density. Also, I would point out in the residential planning area, that also was approved at 145 single-family detached lots. And through the course of time, it actually was also reduced down to, I believe it's 121 lots within that residential planning area. The commercial planning in the north area has yet to occur. That has not been developed. However, the open space is where there's a regional pond where all the stormwater goes for not only for the multifamily, but also for the single-family area. And I believe maybe a portion of the South Commercial Planning area, but I couldn't attest to that for sure. Lot design and layout. So this shows it, the project site basically in a duplex configuration, fronting on streets for the projects that do on Monte Vista Avenue, backing up to public alleys, and then the units that basically front a farm area to the west. This is just the other side of it, showing the extension of Bella Casa Drive, which is actually an alley. It's unconstructed at this time. This project will be required to build that. This is a typical lot layout. And I'm going to see, does this point to, Linda, or if I use this? Or do I have to use my pointer? Okay, I'm not sure if it'd work with the TV. And you guys are pointed backwards, so you won't see it, but I'll try to go this way. So, yeah, see, you can't really read it. I'll back up one. Okay. Okay. There we go. Okay. So these are the driveways. This is an alley. These are 20-foot driveways. So you'll see in the existing residential subdivision, many of those driveways actually don't meet a 20-foot standard. All of these do. We've also included guest parking. Guest parking is required in Douglas County Code at 1 space per 4 units. So we've also provided those throughout the project. You'll see one there and then one here. And there's also 2-car parking inside the garage. So you have 2-car parking in the garage, you have 2 spaces outside the garage in your driveway, and then you also have the guest spaces. Then we have these are the private open space areas. It's a fenced area right here. These are the condenser units for the air conditioning. These are the sidewalks that lead to the existing sidewalk, in this case along Monte Vista Avenue. And also, you can see on this drawing, these are the pads requested by the town of Minden to put your trash receptacles on trash day, so they can pick them up. This is the development plan details. This shows basically where we've used a landscaping with rock berming to shield the condensers in front of the units. There was a public comment that was saying that they thought it would be better to fence it. Either one is acceptable in the design manual. We preferred really just the look of the landscaping as opposed to a fence. I think a fence is very, you don't have to have it, why do it? It doesn't look good forever. Or landscaping does. And this is a typical fence section. And on the bottom, at the time we did this, that was the light fixture I was provided for the homes. Now, there is a difference between this light fixture and what was shown which we'll look at in the elevations for the building. So I think there was a condition or a recommended condition about lighting fixtures being supplied, meeting the standards shown in the elevations, and we are acceptable to doing so. This just is an example of how this will be shielded. You can see the landscaping and the rocks, and in the back, you can kind of see the top of the condenser. Phasing plan is one phase. So the black is where the existing alleys and roads are, and the orangish color is where the new the new alleys will be extended. Proposed RV parking is to the south of the project. There's 15 spaces. This will be managed and maintained by a homeowners association, as will all the common open space. And this is where the open space amenities are located. There's a half-ball basketball court provided, a gazebo picnic area, and a tot lot. Open space, everything that's in the green basically is open space. So those would be managed by the association, so all the landscaping around the building envelopes. The parkways, the sidewalks are all owned and maintained by an association. These are the floor plans. There's two different plans that we've provided. The 1590, which is 1,590 square feet with the two-car garage, so that's the heated space. And then 1,839 square foot townhome, which is also has a two-car garage, 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath. We have three different kind of buildings that they're proposing. This is the Spanish A elevations. It shows, in this case, I believe those were proposed as stone. With some of the Spanish elements, we worked very closely with the staff trying to get these elevations where they were consistent with the specific plan and also with the adjacent homes. We believe we've accomplished that. This shows the side elevations. And this is the rear that would face the alleys. This is the Spanish B elevation. Again, rock accents, brick accents, shutters. And you can see the coach light there, which doesn't really match the first development plan, what we showed you with the little light. Both are actually probably consistent. The first one's probably more consistent because the light source is shielded. With coach lights, you just have to be sure that the light source is shielded so you don't throw off a lot of fugitive light. And this is the Spanish C elevations. Again, stone treatments. There's a variety of colors, all with tile roofs. I want to point out all these homes are proposed with tile roofs. Color materials. So this again just shows the stucco, tile roofs, the different colors, and the idea is to have a variety of these available in the project so you don't have a lot of monotony in the project. There's a variation of colors and materials. This was for Spanish B, which shows brick elevations or accents with stucco and a flat tile roof. And the rounded, again, version of the tile roof, different colors and different stone treatments on the outside. Traffic. So the master plan amendment to the Nevada Northwest specific plan in 2017 removed a casino, a hotel, an RV park, and 400,000 square feet of commercial development. So that was a sea change in the traffic in the specific plan. All the mitigation in 2001 was based on basically a hotel about the size of the CBI with a 100-space RV park and a 230-unit, I believe, hotel, and the 400,000 square feet of commercial floor area, which is about the equivalent of about 2.5 of our Walmarts in south part of town. That was removed from the plan, and in place of that, they were the 80 single-family homes that are in that area now, that they're under construction, and 50 townhouses that are also now under construction on the west side of Ironwood. Also in conjunction with that was some reconfiguration of some commercial parcels. I think there's about 7 to 12 acres of commercial along the front. And with that development, they redid the entire intersection, basically, of Highway 88, 395, built a collector into the roundabout, and built all the internal streets that ultimately end up at Ironwood. So that occurred. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but that's what happened with the traffic as a result. In 2001, based on those studies, can compare it was the traffic ADT was 18,989 cars. 2017, with the removal of the hotel element, it took out basically 57% of the traffic. So although you had the same mitigation, there was far less traffic as a result. And as I stated earlier, on this site, since that original study, we've reduced it from 145 to 116 units. And of course, the multifamily, or excuse me, the single family has also been designed at less density. The extension of Muller Parkway, which goes from 395 to the, I'll call it the eastern edge of where the specific plan would line up on actually the Bentley properties to the north. That was built by the original developer of the Nevada Northwest Plan. He actually tried to build the intersection improvements there. They put in the signal infrastructure, they put in the lighting or the electrical to get to it. NDOT would not allow the improvements to go in. So that's why there's no light there today. After that, the owner at that time entered into litigation with the county, and there was a settlement as a result of that, where the county took responsibility for building basically that signal at that intersection as a result of that settlement agreement. Currently, I'll just point out, Muller Parkway will probably, in my opinion, will be the trigger that requires that signal to finally be built. Under the agreement with Park Ranch, the county has in the agreement till December of 2025 to build Muller Parkway, which would, if connected all the way through, which it should, would trigger that signal. The completion so I'm going to go back historically. The completion of Muller Parkway and all the interior roads also was phase 1, 2004, circa when all that was built. And then, of course, in 2020 is when the new signal and roundabout went in at 395. We have agreed and recommended our submittal to a traffic study for Lucerne Street, Lucerne and 395, for payment of mitigation fees towards that signal. Lucerne Street 395 intersection is probably the most studied intersection in Douglas County. The agreements to signalize it go back to 1986. In my calculations, the county's collected close to $240,000 in fees towards signalizing that. And there's also, any mitigation fees from this project would be in addition to that, as well as other projects that have been conditioned. I believe that the multifamily may have been conditioned to pay some fees that's on the corner of Monte Vista and Ironwood. That'll also be in addition to that. So there's been a significant amount of monies paid towards those improvements. But again, it's up to NDOT to tell everybody when they're ready, if ever, to let a signal go in there. They've been reluctant in the past because of the distance between 395 intersections going south to the Lucerne Street intersection. So that's one of the reasons why it's, even though they've collected all this money, nothing's ever gone forward. But we are willing to pay our fair share and proportionate share towards the signalization of that intersection. Drainage. So again, all this drainage and how the master drainage plan for the Nevada Northwest site was set, designed and constructed back in 2004. There are some, and I can't point to this unfortunately, but maybe I can use your thing just to show a little bit of what I know about it. So the drainage, the black are the storm drains that are underground. So you have surface drainage here in this, like in this alley or this future alley, there'll be a grade break. Part of it surface drains here to a drainage interceptor, then goes into the pipes. And then there's part of the alley drains this way, again goes into the DI, enters the system, and comes out, and then drains to the south to the regional pond. All this water too from here also comes down the same interceptor drainage pipes and comes through here. And over here, you can see on this alley, same thing. There's a grade break approximately here. This part of it drains this way, goes into the interceptor, enters the system, and goes out. And from this grade break, part of it runs out here. And this was a weird one. It does, I think, wrap to the east, hits a drainage interceptor, comes back in the pipe, and exits out here into the Martin Slough. And this also shows kind of the directional arrows, and we're just draining it all the way through. Surface drain hits the drainage interceptor, enters a pipe, and goes out. These are the new utility line extensions. The brown are the existing sewer lines, and the blue is the water, and the green and the blue, light blue, are just the sewer and water utilities that'll be installed linking up to those existing mains. Transfer development rights does require, as I said earlier, transfer of 116 development rights. And the owner has secured, I believe, 96 of those TDRs and has a agreement to purchase the rest contingent upon us getting an approval. That ends my presentation. Hopefully I can answer
Questions
any questions.
from the commission? I have a couple. One of the concerns that I have just off the top of my head is construction debris is a major problem. And are there things that can be done to minimize the amount of debris that blows into the ditch along Muller? You know, the one that's just on the edge of the subdivision? Because this is going to be a large, very large project.
Yeah, I understand. There are things that they can do. They could put up a silt fence to block any blowing trash. You can't get 100% of it, but a lot of it's just policing by the contractor on the site. And those rules are usually, I believe they're enforced by the building department. But if there's an issue with trash, they can pull their permits. So there's a fairly 50-unit project going on behind my house right now. And Cardiel Homes is building it. And I have to say, so far, they've done a good job with trash management. There's some very large containers that they fill so they don't have just little receptacles that blow all over. So there's a place to put all the trash. And I haven't, in all honesty, noticed any trash issues, but that doesn't mean there couldn't be on other sites. And there is a code enforcement mechanism to deal with it.
And also, you have designated in your proposal, you say proposed open space improvements and proposed RV parking improvements, and you have the RV parking on both designated. And I fail to see how RV parking can be designated as open space
It is
in
not.
a subdivision.
It was not calculated as part of the open space.
Okay, because you have them both marked as open space. So can you,
I'll have to correct that calculation. It was not included.
so removing that as open space, do you still meet the minimum requirement for
Yes.
open space? Okay, thank you. Other questions from the commission?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have about 4 or 5 topics I'd like to cover, and I'll just throw these out. Some people may not need to comment on some of these issues, but AJ may need to weigh in, or Jeremy and Keith. I would always appreciate your opinion. As I said in my opening statement, to disclose that Larry Walsh had contacted me by email, and he raised 2 points after the Minden Town Board met that he would like me to go through. One is the TDRs, and I think you've explained that very well. And just to clarify, AJ or Keith, you may know this as well, but the TDR process is basically an internal process. The applicant makes those purchases and then submits them to the Director of Community Development, I believe, who approves them. So those will not come back to the Planning Commission for approval of the TDRs. Is that correct, AJ or Keith?
I can answer that if you'd like, AJ. I've certified and transferred them for, yes, those are, there's an application that goes to create them from a farmer rancher who has to provide an easement for the open space, showing it meets the codes. County staff approves it, they issue a certificate. That certificate's tracked as that transfer occurs over time between owners. Then ultimately, it gets assigned to the site. So those, once they're assigned, they're basically, that's it, they're done. They can't go anywhere else. So when we're done with the final map, we give basically I think it's something of a letter of assignment to the site, and that finishes those TDRs.
Thank you. The next issue is the one to me that's very important and complicated, and Mr. Walsh talks about the parking on Monte Vista, and they did discuss this at the Minden Town Board meeting, and I believe on the packet page 310, the letter from J.D. Frisbee talks about the decisions that were made by the Minden Town Board, and one of them, the second to last one, is no on-street parking along Monte Vista Avenue, and then it says needs to be added to CC&Rs for this development. So I just wanted to go over with you, Keith, your view of the condition in place by the Minden Town Board, and then address the question of the width of the road on Monte Vista. I measured it myself, and I think my measurements are fairly accurate, but it appears to me to be 35 feet. Tom Dallaire, in a discussion that we had last week, said that generally the standard requirement for, and correct me, Lucille or Jeremy, if I'm wrong on this, but Tom explained to us that generally the requirement for parking is a 9-foot stall on either side of the road, and then 2 12-foot lanes that would go back and forth on the road, and that would require 42 feet. So it's my concern that, and this is what Larry Walsh raised as well, so why I investigated it further, is it appears to me that the road is a little bit narrower than we might want for standard parking on both sides of the road. Now, I did drive the neighborhood and looked at Bella Vista and Verona Way, which are adjacent to this development, and I think those roads are also 35, and I think those roads do have parking on both sides of the street. But when I drove them this morning, I could see if there was a fairly large truck or something else parked on each side of the road, it would be somewhat narrow to be able to get 2 cars simultaneously through a road of 35 feet. So I guess maybe Keith, if you can start off with your comments on the town of Minden's conditioning of this, and then on observations in what I encountered when I was viewing the property.
Sure, Mr. Waldner, I'll be happy to respond. The issue of the parking on Monte Vista, we told the town board, and we stand by our comments that we were in agreement with all their conditions. So if they're agreeing to, if they're requesting us to make CC&Rs to that effect, we will do so.
Okay, so basically the developer would have CC&Rs before the imposition of a homeowners association, which would come later in the process as the homes are sold. So the developer controls the CC&Rs until the point that the homeowners association becomes the enforceable body.
Well, I mean, that's, I guess, a kind of a gray area, I would say, from an enforcement perspective, because that is a public right-of-way. And the enforcement is incumbent upon actually the Douglas County Sheriff to enforce parking regulations on public streets. Even Douglas County's community development code enforcement doesn't enforce parking regulations.
So
If the town of Minden wants to strip parking off, they should designate it as a no parking street and put up signs, and then that could be enforced by Douglas County. That is I'll defer to your legal counsel on that, but having someone enforce rules in public property can be a problem. We agreed to it, but I don't know if it's enforceable, I guess is the answer.
Yes, but I just want to make sure we are all on the same page and that you are in agreement with the town of Minden, and then we'll leave it up to the enforcers to determine who puts the signs up and who goes and monitors and writes tickets.
That is exactly my point.
Okay, great. I'm very pleased that you're in agreement there and we don't have any gray areas, because I do think that's a question of safety, because that really is a different road than the internal roads in the neighboring subdivision. This is going to be used by a lot of people to go to Muller Parkway, and when Muller Parkway gets really rolling, the traffic on that road, I think, will be considerable. And it's important for me to know that safety is a primary concern. Moving on, I did want to comment briefly, and then we may need to address this, Madam Chair, at a later point, on Mimi Moss's comments that were submitted today to us. And she provided a very detailed analysis of the conditions. I only had the opportunity to read it before the meeting today, so I didn't have an opportunity to go through with a fine-tooth comb and see how they comported with the conditions that are in the packet already. I think she has at least 5 or 6 requests that may have some merit. I'm not sure, Keith, if you have reviewed this, or Linda, if you have reviewed this document as well. But I hope we can find some way to delve more deeply into the suggestions that she makes, maybe not at this point, but maybe further down the road, because I think she does make some good points, and she was a very valuable member of the planning staff. In some instances, I wish she was back helping us on the planning staff, but I do think that's something that needs some further attention, whether it's at this meeting in this decision authority or for a future time.
That's fine, Mr. Waller. I'm happy to meet with Mimi and planning staff to go through her conditions. I didn't find, most of them were not objectionable, some of them were repetitive, and others were, but there's a couple things I think really is at the purview of this board today.
That was my general view as well, but I wanted to see if there's anything that jumped out to you as extremely objectionable.
Only a couple things. Do you want me to point those out?
If this is the appropriate time, Madam Chair, or we could defer this until after public comment to discuss it?
If there are no other comments from the planning commissioners, I'd like to go to public comment.
Okay, I have 1 or 2 other quick comments, and then I'll
Okay, and then
conclude.
Paul has some questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we can address that at a later point after public comment. The last thing I do want to point out is, as you did in your presentation, Keith, you talked about the original proposal, and I just would like to note that it was 145 buildings, housing units, and now it's down to 116 by my calculation. It's about a 20% reduction. And just for context, for the larger picture, many of you have heard in Planning Commission meetings and Board of County Commissioner meetings in the past, well, we have 4,500 homes that are on the books that could be built. Well, I think this is a good example of when the rubber meets the road and these plans come before us, it is often downsized. So this will be a reduction in the total number of units that come across us when we look at the growth management ordinance and all of the numbers on these. So we're dropping the numbers down. So I just wanted to make that observation and make sure the public is well aware of that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were in the now 17 written commentary of this project, the predominantly mentioned in most of them, if not all, was parking as a grave concern of the surrounding neighborhood, including on Lacoste, as Commissioner Walter just described. Is it possible, and I'll ask AJ, to have a condition for the developer to install, or at least pay for, no parking signs as a condition of this development, so that they must be put up on that road?
This is AJ Hames from the DA's office, for the record. They don't have any jurisdiction over the road itself because it is a public road, so they couldn't be required to regulate parking on the road. And so I think that's why the town of Minden suggested that they just include it within the CCNRs, make it an agreement between the owners that they would all agree essentially to not park out on the road. But they would, since it is not a road that belongs to the development, they wouldn't be able to dictate who could park there.
Well, as I looked at the site plan, I'm talking about off, not on the road, but no parking signs that would be not on the road, but clearly affecting the area on the other side of a sidewalk, no parking. Do you follow me? The sign itself is not in the right-of-way.
Right.
The site, that is part of the improvement. That's why I was wondering if we could require those no parking signs to be placed in there, which would assuage the concern over the lack of enforceability, which I agree with the applicant, having to do with CCNRs. That is almost illusory that you get an agreement on an HOA that you cannot park in a certain area, because the enforcement characteristics of that are, as I termed, illusory.
Yeah, AJ Hames, for the record, I think that the no parking signs would also have, they wouldn't be enforceable. Their erection there next to the roadway doesn't necessarily mean that they would be enforceable, because again, they wouldn't have any jurisdiction to dictate what happens on the road. So even if the sign was put up on the property of the development, it would still be attempting to state what could happen outside the development on the roadway. And so, certainly they could put those signs up in the same way that I could put a no parking sign in my front yard, but it wouldn't necessarily be enforceable simply because it's located there.
Right, and we've seen that in Genoa. If you just drive down the street, you'll see the no parking signs, but people do honor them. That's my point. I guess I am very concerned, as is Commissioner Walter, that parking seeps into that. Is there any way we can get some feedback from Minden or whoever the enforcement entity is, so that we don't approve a project that later causes tremendous congestion, which is the complaint of 14 of our 17 public comments, which is really, and I agree, a valid point.
Yeah, AJ Hames, I don't think that the process of restricting parking would occur at this time. I think it would be a separate process. The county has ordinances on the books. The town of Minden can regulate parking, but that's typically done separately. And that is what makes it enforceable when the entity that controls the road dictates that there can't be any parking there. That's
Yes.
what gives it its enforceability. But that would occur at a later time.
You see my quandary, because once we approve this, it's approved. And if it never occurs, we've just caused a change in the character of the neighborhood substantially. And
If I may.
I guess I'm troubled.
Talking with the town manager, they are concerned as well, and perhaps there's a condition we can put on the project that when it's built out, the town of Minden needs to put in no parking signs as they do speed signs along Monte Vista, because that's a conversation we had in our pre-PC meeting, that speed limit signs need to go up to, because there are none along Monte Vista, and speeding is an issue. The speed limit throughout the neighborhood is 25. Nobody drives 25 on Monte Vista. I drive 25 on it, and I get tailgated on there all the time.
AJ Ames for the record. I think you can impose conditions on the applicant, but I don't know that the board has jurisdiction to tell the town of Minden what can be done with its roads.
JD seemed very willing to let the pressure come from the planning commission. But
Certainly
that's
pressure could be applied from the planning commission.
Yes.
I think that, and the public as well.
The other point I have, Madam Chair, is to the applicant. You've indicated the garbage pads that would be constructed in the alley, which I think is a good idea, which would hold the garbage on garbage.
Outside the alley.
Yeah, on garbage days, outside the alley.
Yes.
That's exactly right. So they would not be obstructing traffic, which was another concern that I shared after I looked at the plot plan, basically, and the measuring the distances, that is the widths of the alley, et cetera. Where is the provision for the garbage to go before it hits the pad? Is it just the people keep it in the garage
Yes.
or leave it in their driveway?
They put it in their garage. That's how it works in my project. That's how it works everywhere. The rule generally has been if this was a project owned by a single owner and these were all rentals, then you'd be required to put in the quarter yard dumpsters every so often, where
Right.
people would take it there. But when they're individually owned, the individual totes are preferred.
This, because of the density, this probably should also be a CC&R with.
They have to have them because they're going to be an association that maintains so
Yeah,
much.
you shouldn't have the garbage sitting out there because there was also a concern about lowering the value of the surrounding properties, and nothing does that quicker than having a bunch of exposed garbage on the street or on an alleyway. So that's probably something that I'd ask the developer to do while the developer is also the declarant before selling the property.
Mr. Bruno, I would recommend you put that as a recommended condition.
Okay, excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. And that recommended condition, if it were a CC&R, should require a supermajority in order to change it, which protects the surrounding landowners. Do you follow me? You couldn't just get a majority to say, well, you can now put your garbage in the alley or on the driveway or wherever you choose.
That's fine. I don't want to see people leaving their trash cans out longer than.
No, and I'd rather see this benefiting the whole surrounding area, plus providing much-needed housing. And I commend the project. It's just that these details can really make or break the compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, in my opinion. And I appreciate your comments on that. Thanks, that's it. Thank you.
You do bring up a good point. Could you put up the slide that shows the subdivision, and would it be possible for you to point out where the trash pads would be?
All the way back. Oh, there, this shows it. So that's the, I'll point with this. That's these right here, Madam Chairman. Here, those are the pads. There's one there, outside the traveled way of the alley. We also agreed to have beyond that, where we can control it, a 3 feet of clear space behind the paved section so they can get in and out.
Okay, and
So
the
you can't put
ones
fence
that
in
are
there, and
going,
you can't block it with plants. Has to be clear for them to get access.
okay, the ones that are on the end of Bella Rosa and Monte Vista, the 4 townhome units, right there on the corner.
So you want to go to the large plan? Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
the
Okay.
larger picture. The ones that have the hammerhead.
Okay, these.
Where will their trash pickup be?
So there'd be one, I would think, on this side, and one on this side, and one on this side, and one on this side, kind of that pattern.
Okay, the concern I have, I know after talking with the town manager, that design at the end is very problematic for snow plowing, and it's problematic for the trash trucks. Would it not be better to have the concrete pads for trash pickup at the end of the alley so that the residents have to put their trash lined up at the end of the street on Bella Rosa?
If that's what the town would like, we could certainly accommodate that. It's the first time I've heard this.
Yeah, I think it's something we should explore instead of having the trash truck going in and trying to edge its way around in order to get out, because I know it's a problem in Montera. When I walk up there, and on those streets that are up there, you see the people have lined their trash cans up at the end of the street instead of having the trash truck trying to get into the hammerheads.
That's fine, Ms. Casey, we can do that.
Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Ken?
a question for Keith. On the site plan, while you have it up there, on the east side, there's an alley on the far top part of that map.
Are you talking about the other page?
No, that one's fine. The alley on the east end of that map, that would be the top. Is there housing behind where the end north site?
Are you, so,
I wasn't able to visit, yeah, up above. Yeah,
Here?
is there housing over there?
yes.
So the alley is backed up to the existing housing?
Those houses get access to the garage from that alley.
And how wide is the alley?
The total right-of-way width is 24 feet. The paved width, I believe, is with the gutter pan, part of the gutter pan is actually 20, but I think if you measure the asphalt, it's 18.
Okay. Another question is, on the tentative map, you're calling the green on the tentative map open space, but technically that's just lawn and landscaping area. How is that described as open space?
There's a very technical description of how the county calculates open space, and I think Linda references it in her staff report. I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically there are some rules. If it has to be, you can't count anything greater than, for example, I think it's 8% slopes. You cannot count areas that are less than 15 feet between structures. So we go through, we look at all those areas to calculate it out.
Thank you, Keith.
Any other questions? Then I'll open it for public comment. Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome.
Don't go away, though. Please come to the microphone, say your name for the record, and sign the roster.
Madam Chair,
Please sign the roster.
I already have.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Miles Dreslov, and I am a practicing attorney and a developer. However, I am not here today in that capacity. I am here today as a concerned resident of 1791 Bella Casa Drive in Minden, Nevada. The concern I have is I'm grateful for the reduction in the density of 145 units to 116 units, and I respect the cooperation of the developer in making that happen. However, this is going to present an opportunity for 116 new families. The major concern I have relates to the intersection of Highway 395 and Muller. I have unfortunately experienced several close calls during the course of my brief tenure as a resident in Minden. People traveling south on 395 when the speed adjusts from 65 miles an hour to 55 miles an hour, then to 45 miles per hour as you approach the intersection at Santa Anita. They simply do not slow down. Turning left off of Muller onto Highway 395 is a suicidal mission. And I have already had communications with the Douglas County Sheriff indicating that there have been accidents in the past, and they're most likely, with enhanced development, there will be more accidents in the future. One of my concerns, which is related to this particular intersection, is the families that will be moving into this new development, many of them will have younger drivers, and as a result, if they're traveling north or going towards Reno, they're not going to take advantage of the traffic light which currently sits at Santa Anita and Highway 395. When traveling north, the vehicles enter the 35 mile an hour zone into the 45 mile an hour zone. Basically, from my experience, they start to accelerate a lot sooner prior to getting to the increased rate of speed authorization. That said, and I realize there has been an agreement between, I think it's R.O. Anderson and the powers that be, such that any further development will no longer be required to make any financial contribution towards introducing or developing safety protocols. I think that agreement needs to be revisited, and based upon what council has presented, the study in 2001 and the study in 2017.
Thank you, sir.
I believe is flawed. That said, thank you for your time, and again, I would suggest the matter be looked into very seriously.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For the record, I'm Harold Watts. For those people who know me in the room, I go by Hal, and I know quite a few folks here. My big concern, or one of the concerns, as Mr. Paxton asked, is that a subdivision behind to the east of Monte Vista and the alleyway? And the answer is yes. There's 18 single-family homes, either there or under construction or planned, and there are 4 two-story homes. Putting a two-story home directly across the alleyway will, in my opinion, impact the people who have the single-family homes with views from the second story of these other homes into their backyards, into their windows, etc. So, the developer has the right to build. It's within the zoning requirements. 22 years ago, when Nevada Northwestern laid out the plans, they offered Windhaven the benefit of single-story homes bordering Windhaven along Bella Casa. I would like to see, and I'm going to bring this up with the county commissioners at their meeting for final approval, that the east side of Monte Vista be built single-story duplexes and not two-story duplexes. On the west side of Monte Vista, 2 stories, okay, in my opinion. I have sent a letter to you guys. I'm sure you've all read it. And that's really all I have to say. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Mike Chan. I live in that across the alley. I have 2 comments. I submitted written comments. I'm not going to belabor those things. But 2 comments I have today are related to parking. And the comment about parking is all of the traffic studies that have been cited were done when cars were smaller, and 50% of the car owners didn't own a truck. You're talking about putting 2 cars in a garage. Good luck, okay? And so I think all of the comments about parking are less, they're more meaningful if you consider the fact that the people that buy these units won't be able to park 2 cars in the garage. My second comment is related to basically planning. I live across the alley from basically 20 units. I have a 2-story, so they won't be looking into my bedroom. The comment I have is when all these plans were done, you have 2 distinct neighborhoods here. Monte Vista 1 is the one I live in. This is, I would call it Monte Vista 6. 2 totally distinctly different neighborhoods. The alley is what separates them. There's no architectural barrier, aesthetic barrier, or physical barrier between those very 2 distinct neighborhoods. And I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Larry Cart. I live in the La Costa subdivision. And I have a couple of concerns. Mainly is the privacy concern. And I would like to address the fact that I heard the comment before that the Windhaven subdivision was awarded this special provision for 1-stories in the Northwest Pacific Plan. And I have read that, but also if you look at the Northwest Pacific Plan, on, excuse me, on page 177, it states that building heights should relate to open spaces and allow maximum sun and ventilation, as well as provide protection from prevailing winds. It says building heights near existing homes or neighborhoods are restricted to single-story to preserve the privacy of these existing neighborhoods. That was taken out of Amendment 2 and 3 because that was rezoned to residential, light commercial, I believe. And in those amendments, which were project-specific, that verbiage was taken out. However, it is still in the Northwest Pacific Plan. And I feel that, 20 years ago, there was nothing out there. Now there are definitely existing homes, and I feel that that should be taken into consideration for these homes. I heard mention maybe single story on that swath of land that goes between the alley and Monte Vista could be a consideration, My other point is on the parking, the town of Mendon wants to divert it to HOAs, and that's great, but I don't know how enforceable that really is, with an HOA. I think it should be owned by the city, so they can enforce it. Also, if there's no parking on Monte Vista, it brings up a concern to me that there's going to be parking throughout our neighborhood, and I feel that could be an issue. And one other thing is that we were talking about trash and stuff like that earlier. It might be a good idea for the developer to develop a plan, logistics plan that shows where trash is to be collected, where material is to be stocked, because this is a big project, and that's some controls should be in place for that.
Thank you, sir.
Hello. Am I permitted to ask questions for clarification?
They will not be addressed while you're speaking. They will be answered after,
Okay.
if we
First-
can.
Yep. My name is Connie Summers. I live on Bella Casa in Monte Vista. And my first question is the RV parking lot. I'm wondering if that's going to be landscaped or walled or somehow otherwise obscured from view. Second question is, how long does it take for the CCRs to get transferred to an HOA? Third question, guest parking is mentioned. I'm wondering where the guest parking is supposed to be, if it's just throughout the development, or if there's designated guest parking. And last question, I couldn't tell from the map, I don't think, where the AC units are going to be in place. I'm assuming they're behind the development or otherwise obscured or not seen from Monte Vista. And those are my questions.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Madam Speaker and Commissioners, I'm Tom Davis. I live in La Costa. I want to thank the Minden Board and Commissioner Walder for representing them at this, bringing up the concerns. My biggest concern with this project is traffic impediment on Monte Vista. The developers, if you noticed, between Ironwood and Santa Anita, on Monte Vista, the village development designed those properties so that the backs of the houses are to the roads with solid fences with no access from the roads, discouraging street parking. When you turn onto Santa Anita, head towards the roundabout, those developers did the same thing, discouraging street parking. Unfortunately, this developer chose to design these homes to encourage street parking by putting the front of the houses on the streets facing Monte Vista, and also providing gate access sidewalks to that sidewalk, to the sidewalks on Monte Vista. So our concern is we're actually encouraging street parking on Monte Vista with this particular project, where no other developer on these projects have done that in this area. Going back to what Commissioner Walder said is absolutely true. My fear is 10 years from now is going to be, I told you so. Not only, what wasn't mentioned here tonight was also on Ironwood and Monte Vista, there's an apartment complex that's going to be built there, which is going to increase traffic and residents. But also on the west side of Ironwood and Monte Vista, there is a commercial zone. And then on the Mahler and Monte Vista side, there's commercial zoning. So we're actually, when those are developed, that's going to draw more commercial non-resident traffic into this region. And so that street is not wide enough if you have cars parked on both sides. The comment came up that it's the same width as the residential streets. We don't draw commercial traffic through residential streets. That's the people who live there, drive those streets. This Monte Vista between Ironwood and Moeller is pretty much a commercial street once the commercial properties are developed. So and what concerned me tonight was the concern of the Minden Board, and then being told that there's probably no way they can enforce it. It was a gray area with the developer pretty much telling us that they're probably not going to be able to enforce it nor want to. So I think it's 10 years from now, especially when Moeller is done and that traffic increases there, it's going to be, and I told you so, a lot of traffic, a lot of kids crossing that road, getting out of cars, running over to grandma's house on Monte Vista. It's going to be a bad scene. So I would like to see some way for us to enforce that no parking before this project is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Got to be quick.
Sorry about that. I wanted to make sure I was the last one in the neighborhood to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, my name is Mimi Moss, and I'm actually representing about 10 residents that could not attend the meeting today and asking for your consideration if I could speak longer regarding the proposal. I did submit comments to you And I'm hoping that you've read those comments and you can make a decision or evaluation based on that. So it'll probably take me at least 10 or 12 minutes to read through my comments and then look at the recommended conditions. I know Mr. Walder had mentioned that, whether that should be considered now or not. So I ask for your consideration.
What does the Planning Commission desire? We'll give you 6. Talk fast.
Okay, all righty. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Mimi Moss. I've lived in La Costa Plan Development for 16 years. I worked for Douglas County in 2001 and actually brought this project forward to hearing in front of the Planning Commission and Board for approval. So I'm familiar with the project, and I've also talked with many of my neighbors on the standards and requirements of the specific plan itself. I am recommending modified condition, staff's recommended conditions, just for clarification and project-specific issues that I've raised in my comments. One is regarding the maintenance of the landscaping, the park strip along Monte Vista Avenue. Up until last week, or 3 weeks ago, we had 5 to 6 foot weeds and no maintenance of the park strip at all. Last week, the owner finally came forward and trimmed the bushes where you can actually walk on the sidewalk. And the main issue still remaining is we have dead plants, dead treat trees that have been removed for whatever reason, and that needs to be replaced, and also any dead plantings that are there. So that's one of my recommendations, is that they bring forward under the staff's recommended condition regarding landscaping, and that would be condition 7B, that they submit a landscape plan that identifies those areas that need to be replanted and irrigation systems that are working properly, that kind of thing. And also regarding the pavers up to the sidewalk, I think Keith mentioned that they were willing to look at doing that. That was part of that condition as well. So the landscaping was one of the issues, and who's going to maintain that landscaping once it's in. I had recommended changes to condition number 9 regarding the homeowners association and who's responsible for all of those common areas up until the time that the CC&Rs are set and the HOA is set up and they're collecting fees. And so my concern is the owners over time have been lax in maintaining the property. Are they going to step up and maintain the property until the HOA is set up, or an association is in place and the fees are being collected? And that was my reason for condition number 9 addition. I also had comments regarding the building elevations and the material. La Costa does not have brick on the exterior of the homes. None of them do. They're all stone or rock veneer. And I'm asking that brick be specifically prohibited, and that rock and the stucco, or rock be allowed on the stucco. I'm asking that the garage doors have windows, because in La Costa, at least 90% of the single-family portion of Phase 1 have windows in their garage doors, which allows light into the garage, where you don't have to turn on a light when you go into it. There are times, so it saves on energy as well, but it provides a good finish for the exterior of the building and breaks up that wall plane that is facing the alleys where the existing residents live. And they have complaining about the 2-story, but this might help soften that 2-story look. The lights, the standard that's submitted with the application shows a modern type light, a residential light. It's more a commercial type light, and the building elevations show residential type light, so that standard should be changed. And so one of the conditions is to allow the staff to review that and adjust that as well. I had comments regarding the AC units. Keith spoke to that, whether they put fencing or landscaping, just to ensure that over time that will be mitigated in terms of screening from the street. And the last major item that I talked about was the right-of-way for Bella Casa Drive and Bella Boulevard. The right-of-way varies from 37 feet to 50 feet and 59 feet on those streets. I think originally the developer looked at maybe putting a landscape median as you enter into the subdivision, which never occurred. But I think what happened is as the project was built, those changes were made, and the curb is actually consistent with the rest of the curb in the rest of the street in the subdivision. So there's a discrepancy there. And then who's going to landscape that park strip along those side streets? Who's going to maintain it and irrigate it? I don't think the town looked at that, or it was brought up at the town meeting. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at least by the applicant. This application could consider an abandonment of a portion of those right-of-ways if it was brought forward for your discussion and for the hearing. But that hasn't occurred. It could happen in the future. It could be a condition of approval. It just makes it cleaner from that perspective. The parking issue on Monte Vista, you've talked a lot about that. The way I read the condition by the town means that they just want the CC&Rs to say there's no parking on the street, period. They took no action on saying that they don't want parking on the street now, because in the minutes, J.D. Frisbee said that they would look at that over time and make a determination whether no parking would be allowed. So those are my comments, and I thank you for that additional time. And I'm available for any questions you might have too afterward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Keith, you took copious notes. Do you want me to ask you questions, or you want to run through your notes?
I think that's the best. You asked me
Okay.
your questions.
Let's see. Mr. Dresslove was talking about speeding and turning from Muller onto 395. And as far as I know, that all lies with NDOT, and there's not much we can do about that.
Part of is partially NDOT, and also a big part of it's Douglas County and the requirements to do more improvements. As far as it wasn't just an agreement with R.O. Anderson, it was this federal court settlement agreement with Douglas County. So that's where that came from. Again, I think if the county wanted, if it felt there was that big a problem, there are things that they could do temporarily to mitigate that. But I will leave that up to the county engineer to advise you about that. But pork chop, right in, right out only until the signal's built, would be one thing that you could do to limit access, particularly the southbound turning movement, which I think the concern was about. I agree, I would want to make a left turn there. I go to the signal.
But it doesn't pertain to this project in particular,
Correct.
so that's something to take up with the Board of Commissioners. With regards to Mr. Watts, he refers to, and I've heard this many times, I've lived in Windhaven for 10 years, and I've never seen it written down, the single-story agreement between Windhaven and the First and La Costa. Is that something that's a written agreement?
It's not a written agreement, it's part of the specific plan. So when the county approved the specific plan, one of the requirements was to limit the homes that back up to Windhaven to single story.
Is there any desire between your project to do it between?
There is not.
Okay.
I think there's been ample notice given for 20 years what that was zoned for, and that they were planned as townhouses. So I understand the concern, I understand, why they feel that way, but there is some due diligence. They could have easily found out if they were worried about it at the time they bought their house.
Okay, I do have a question for AJ. The reference was made by Mr. Cart regarding the amendments to remove language from the specific plan. with regards to lighting and air circulation, et cetera. And he wondered, since it's not a commercial project anymore, if that language should be considered because it's now a residential project that's coming in. And once the language is removed from a specific plan, it's gone, isn't it? There's a whole process to put language back into a plan. Do you know what I'm saying?
AJ Hames from the DA's office for the record. Yeah, a specific plan can be amended, and the amended plan is the most current version of the plan. I don't know in this case what the specific plan said. I don't have a copy of it in front of me. I don't know. I mean, I think we're hearing from other people there what they perceive the plan to say, and they could be right, or they might be getting details wrong, and I have no idea.
Keith, you're aware of the language that Mr. Carter is referring to?
Yeah, he's referring to there's some, what I would call overarching policy statements at the beginning of the plan that are reasons and rationale why there's some of the conditions and planning things that occurred in that plan that did occur. It's not an implementation condition. It's, we're trying to accomplish this, so that's why we brought forward, because of the existing neighborhood in Windhaven, who had no advance notice, by the way, what was going to occur here, why we did that. So that was what that's referring to. It wasn't an implementation for this project or for this phase of the project. There's very clear exhibits that show the distinction between the one-story only and the two-story.
Mrs. Consumer, she had questions regarding the RV parking lot, if it was going to be landscaped, how long it was going to take for the CCRs to convert to the HOA, if guest parking was going to be back in the subdivision, and if the AC units were going to be obscured.
Okay, there's a lot there. So let me try to go through that. So the RV parking is not being proposed to be fenced or walled off. It will be landscaped. It's part of the landscape plans that we provide with the site improvement permits to the county. The AC units, I think I went through that on the development plan. It showed where those were at and what we're proposing for screening. What was the other one?
And guest parking?
Guest parking is basically throughout the project, meeting the 1/4 criteria that's in the code.
And then were the AC units going to be obscured?
As we discussed earlier, and I showed, yes, landscaping boulders is what we proposed to utilize for that purpose.
And Mr. Davis talked about the traffic on Monte Vista and the commercial areas and the other multifamily projects that are going to be around the area, and that the projects in the Santa Anita area, how it's walled off so that it doesn't encourage parking on those streets. I call it the McDonald's neighborhood. And that this project, the townhomes, having the front doors facing the street, while it gives more of a neighborhood feeling to the project by having them face the street, it also encourages on-street parking. And that's a concern of his.
I understand that the requirement to have these face the street was actually part of both the specific plan and the plan development. For us to have done otherwise, we would have had to bring forward an amendment on both of those documents to have a wall along Monte Vista. We chose not to amend the existing plan and approvals and complied with the document.
Was there anything else? Bryce? And do you have anything to address with what Mimi brought up?
I just want to, I guess, make a couple of comments I heard from one of the speakers about this being two distinct neighborhoods. It's kind of hard to argue that these are supposed to be two distinct neighborhoods when they're all part of the same specific plan and they're all part of the same plan development. And we are here discussing how architecturally they have to be compatible with the existing homes that are built in Monte Vista. I don't think these are two distinct neighborhoods. They're two different distinct housing types, but it's one neighborhood, and that's really what this meeting is about and what we're trying to accomplish, to make sure that we are compatible with that and consistent with the planning documents that rezoned this property 19 years ago. I guess that's my general comment. I understand the issue with traffic. It's complex, and it's hard to have people get a full gauge of what will happen in the future because it's hard to tell sometimes. But there's going to be a lot of changes in traffic when the full transportation plan is built out. When Muller Parkway is built and connected, when Hayborn Road connects to the roundabout between Windhaven and Montera, that's going to take a lot of traffic that was normally going through these neighborhoods. It's going to route it around. So the more of these connections you have, the more it disperses the traffic, and less you have this effect of funneling traffic down what are really the only ways, some ways in and out. So these things occur over time. It's not completely done yet. That's one of the reasons why, we all struggle with traffic, because it's hard. And then you have, of course, the other entity, which is NDOT. NDOT has its own methodology of determining whether a signal gets installed at an intersection. You have to do something called a warrant study. I think Jeremy could tell you a little bit about what that. I'm not an engineer, but I know one of the things they look at is how many traffic accidents there have been at the intersection. So if you really want to get a signal out there, go sacrifice yourself and get in a couple wrecks, and that'll help trigger that warrant analysis. It's strange, but that's one of the factors that they look at. So there's some things out of all of our control, including Douglas County's, regarding some of these traffic issues. But over time, looking at the transportation plan, the connections that are planned and actually are now look like they're maybe moving forward, I'm hoping things will be better. Parenthetically, just have to say, when I was sitting in this seat where Linda is right now, we had some kids, a child that was ran over on 395. The county flew out a consultant on traffic calming and traffic safety from Florida. His name was Dan Burton. It's one of the reasons why there's a roundabout, State Route 88 and County Road. I walked around with Dan, the grandmother whose kid got ran over. Sorry. Don't know why I'm getting emotional. So we modified the street sections to make them narrower. So when you have cars parked on them, it creates something called traffic friction, slows traffic down. Mr. Nelson, you live in a subdivision with the same site, or you don't, maybe you have a house there, I don't know if you do anymore, but over in, near what was called the Oakwood specific plan, there were some roads that they're the same width as these exist, served by alleys. They have cars parked on both sides. I'm going to venture to guess there hasn't been anybody ran over because of a speeding car. And that's why the standards went from a 40-foot paved section to a 32-foot paved section in 1996. So those standards were changed and reduced because of the speeding traffic through our neighborhoods. So what I see is a dichotomy between concern about speeding traffic on one hand and on-street parking on the other. You have to understand they're related. If you take all the traffic off, you get faster traffic. Or if you take all the parking off, you get faster traffic. That's why when you're trying to remediate and slow traffic down, a lot of consultants will come in and start building things like chicanes to try to narrow the lane widths to slow traffic down. So I know that we're all concerned about it. Traffic engineers love to have wide roads because it conveys lots more traffic. But the planners generally don't care that much about traffic, but care more about safety.
Thank you. Other questions for Keith? Bryce?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions for Keith. I just have some statements in general, if that's okay.
Well, I was wondering if you want to hear from Jeremy.
That's at your discretion, ma'am.
Jeremy, do you want to address the traffic issue, since it's a big part of this?
So Jeremy Hutchings, for the record, you're Douglas County engineer. So, I mean, the overarching point is for this specific plan, it used to be a casino. The amount of traffic that was approved previously has gone way down with the residential use. Keith's point about traffic calming is exactly correct. You have two competing uses. If you put parking on street, you'll naturally slow down. It causes friction, and you perceive to be less safe, so you'll slow down if that's your goal. It's counter to trying to get more traffic through if that's your other goal. So it is competing interests, but putting parking on the street it is a calming technique. But overall, the traffic is less. I've been listening to Keith here. He hasn't said anything I agree with what he's saying. The warrant study would be needed to do a light at Muller and 395. That likely will happen when Muller punches through by 2025. If, God willing, the creek doesn't rise, that's when it'll go through. The other elements about there's commercial elements to the project, that's all true. That was all accounted for in the original approvals. And this project is infill less overall historically. Happy to try to answer any questions. Traffic is a very dark art of the engineering world that I wish John Herb would be here to speak more specifically, but happy to try to answer any other questions.
Paul?
Am I correct that another technique for slowing traffic is just painting a fog line? Not allowing parking, but painting a fog line, which gives the illusion of a more narrow road.
Agreed.
A lot of people think that fog line is a bike lane. Are there other questions? Okay, then we'll go to comments. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Keith. Comments. Bryce first, then David.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. The difficult thing about being a planning commissioner is we're constantly trying to juggle the need for, and I'm going to use buzzwords that are somewhat controversial, workforce housing, affordable housing, et cetera, for our teachers, EMS, nurses, firefighters, police officers, et cetera. And so it becomes complicated when we try to address the concerns of the public, which are incredibly valid. Especially situations like should we do 2-story versus 1-story for privacy. And we get to the point where if we do too much, then from a development standpoint, it's just not financially feasible. And so we end up in a place where maybe there isn't any more development. And for many in the valley, that would be just fine. And when I was asked to be appointed to this position years ago, one of the things that I committed to do was to balance responsible growth with the conservation of open space and preserving ag. And I believe that I've done that for almost 4 years. And so when these type of projects come before me, I try to assess, okay, in my vote, will I have kept my promise or will I have deviated from that? And so, and I believe that there is a critical issue in the county with respect to affordability in housing. And I think this particular type of development accomplishes that to a certain degree. Now, look, this is Douglas County. These are going to be expensive townhomes. Let's don't kid ourselves. But they're not 2-acre developments or 5-acre or 19-acre homes, not necessarily developments. So they are more affordable, I guess you could say. This has also been out there for 21 years. And so to Mr. Walder's point earlier, it takes a long time for these things to come to fruition. And there's been a lot of time spent by the developer and his representatives, as well as the county staff. And I appreciate the hard work that goes into this and the thoughtfulness that it takes to try to reach compromise. And that's really what this is about. I listened to all 7 of the public comments carefully as I try to do every time I'm here, and I think the majority of them have been answered. And so, for me, I think although there are challenges, clearly, the traffic on Monte Vista is a challenge, and I think we've kind of addressed from a traffic engineering perspective how that could be dealt with. The alley, the developer really has no control over that. That's really not in our purview as a body to really address how that's dealt with or the enforcement of that. I think the district attorney has addressed that. And so really all I can do as a commissioner is try to understand your concerns, to take them into consideration, and then make a decision that I think is responsible and achieves the goals, overarching goals of the master plan. And so I just wanted to speak to that and say thank you for the thoughtful comments and the opportunity to be here and to try to balance this very difficult task of responsible growth and conservation.
Yeah, I want to speak a little bit about the findings. Finding Z, which is proposed development incorporates features to minimize adverse effects, including visual impacts of the proposed development on adjacent properties. I don't feel where this has been met, and I think Ms. Moss's recommendations here should be included because it really addresses that issue more than any other. What effect will this project have on La Costa? La Costa is kind of a Mediterranean feel to it. That was the intent. And this does not try to continue that at all. And I'm concerned about that. On the parking issue, referring to CC&Rs as a way to stop parking is a joke. Who enforces CC&Rs? The county doesn't. As far as I know, the towns don't. That falls back on you, the citizen, to bring a lawsuit or whatever to stop it because it's in your CC&Rs. So the CC&R issue is just a bogus issue as far as I'm concerned. Homeowners have much more rights to restrict what you do with your property than the CC&Rs do. That's just a fact. So the comment about the front doors facing the streets, to me, is very relevant. I think that does absolutely encourage more parking on Monte Vista. And I'm very, very concerned about that. I'm concerned about parking partly because I'm involved with the people up at the lake and the issues they have with VHRs and the parking issue up there. And it is dreadful. They're really causing very, very possibility of destruction up there that will kill many, many people in what's going on up there. It's a main issue for me for Douglas County because I see it in almost every project we are now approving where parking is really at a minimal. A 20 by 20 garage today is mostly filled with people's stuff, not cars. That's a reality. I'm a realtor and I go around to a lot of houses and most garages are not used as garages. They're storage bins. So there's a lot of issues I have with this project, but primarily the findings for E, and I like what Mimi Moss has presented as changes to the engineering conditions. Thank you, Ms. Moss.
Other comments? Paul? David, could you turn off your microphone, please?
Our chairwoman pointed out what I think is a critical issue, which is present in the conditions under number 25 about keeping the site free of weeds, trash, and other debris. However, I think it should be expanded to protect such materials from migrating, that is the debris from migrating from the site into the drainage ditches. I think that would give a little bit more protection to the surrounding folks during construction. Secondly, I don't think there was an objection by the applicant to having the declarant put as a CCNR to mitigate or prevent trash from being exposed outdoors other than on the trash pickup day when it should go to the panel. And I think that should also be a condition because that's very important once the project has been constructed so that it keeps a good appearance and does not degrade the broader neighborhood. I am in agreement with Commissioner Nelson with respect to some of, and I've never met her, but I thought that they're very cogent remarks and suggestions that also be added to the conditions. Finally, I am discouraged, but I recognize that it may be something that the commissioners have to do in their communications with the local municipalities in what to do about Monte Vista Avenue and the parking situation on the thoroughfares. I am convinced that our district attorney is correct in his advice to us that we really can't do much to affect something that's outside of our purview, like enforcement of parking on a municipal street. And I couple that with my personal experience on CCNRs, which do require a substantial effort on the part of the citizenry to enforce. And I'm not a big fan of using CCNRs as a prevention device.
Ken?
I have issues with the east end of the property, with the distance from the townhome to the fence and the shadowing and possibly the depreciation of the people's property value because of this development. It looks like it's getting very busy over there, being very, very close to commercial properties. So I don't like to see commercial properties so close to residential areas. I don't know how you blend them, but I'm not liking that either. That's how, the market price obviously is what dictates what this development will be valued at. So not really caring for this development.
Thank you. Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do agree with a lot of what Bryce said and Paul said, and Dave, you made some very good points. To kind of try and move this thing forward, because there's a lot of moving parts here, I'd like to make the following suggestions. I'll just toss them out as suggestions. I do agree with the recommended motion. I think all the findings can be met, but to address the point that Dave made and some of the other points that Paul and Dave made and we talked about earlier, we could add language to the recommended motion, in my opinion, and I would appreciate the district attorney's advice on this too. This is not something that I'm wedded to, but if it helps get to people further down the road, maybe it might work. So after, on the recommended motion, after the basic version where it talks about the approvals and the language says dedicated common areas on a total of 9.49 acres, add and direct staff to examine other proposed conditions before presentation to the Board of Commissioners. So that would be one clause that hopefully on Paul's points, we could pick up some of Mimi's suggestions, some other suggestions that were made by members of the Planning Commission and the public. And then further add a sentence that says, and direct the town of Minden or Douglas County to post no parking signs to enforce CCNRs prohibiting parking on Monte Vista Avenue. So those would be thoughts that I have that might improve the recommended motion and get us to a point where we can compromise and agree on this. But again, I'd appreciate any suggestions the district attorney's office has or the commissioners, whether that helps us get to a conclusion.
David?
Yeah, I would like to, I don't know, maybe AJ has comment on this, to have the conditions that Mimi Moss presented to us be part of that recommendation, that it goes back to the Planning Commission to include those recommendations.
Bryce?
Madam Chair, I don't know that I disagree with that. However, with all due respect to Ms. Moss, this was provided to us as we walked into the meeting today. And so I have not had a chance to fully review it, vet it, really ask questions of it. And so I don't think I can support a motion that overarchingly incorporates these as a condition. Rather, as Kirk mentioned, having staff go back, work with the applicant, include Ms. Moss. You know, she's had conversations that she's had with I think, ma'am, you mentioned 10 other people or what have you. It seems like there's some work to do here in terms of just kind of working through some of these things that don't sound like they're deal killers from a development standpoint. But let's work through those and then bring that recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. But I don't think I can support, I won't support just overarchingly incorporating these into a motion.
Paul?
I appreciate Bryce's comments, and to the extent that Kirk was making a motion, I would second Kirk's motion, that it have that ability for the staff to study the various changes that we've discussed that will make it more compatible with the neighborhood and potentially preserve the property values for the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we can go on with discussion.
Madam Chairman, just for clarification, I did not move that, but I would, subject to any objections by the district attorney's office, if he feels that that language is problematic. So if we can clarify that, then I'll formalize it into a motion.
This is A.J. Haynes from the district attorney's office. The second part of you were going to add two conditions to the end of the recommended motion. The first being to direct staff to consider other proposed conditions that might be then presented to the Board of County Commissioners. And then you said a second addition, which was to direct the town of Minden to add a no parking sign?
I wrote down the language and direct the town of Minden or Douglas County to should post no parking signs to enforce CC&Rs prohibiting parking on Monte Vista Avenue. Maybe that language can be more artfully done, but that's the thrust of what I think can take place. It seems to me that the town of Minden felt that they did not have the authority to post no parking signs. So this language, in my view, would allow the town of Minden and Douglas County to say, okay, who's going to do the dirty work of putting the no parking signs up there and enforcing it? So again, I'm open to other artful ways to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, A.J. Haynes for the record. I think that the recommendation, I think you could recommend to the Board of County Commissioners that they implement parking restrictions on Monte Vista, because I think that is typically done. Most of our parking restrictions are done by ordinance, and so it would be a separate, it wouldn't necessarily be a condition, but it could be part of the motion to make a recommendation that the board adopt parking restrictions concurrently with the approval of this project.
That's very acceptable and very thoughtful language, in my opinion.
And I second that motion as amended. I think that it's critical we just don't leave it in abeyance, because that would be the anathema of what all of the citizenry, at least I said 14 of the 17 commentary that we got in writing, would appreciate. So I second the motion.
What is the entire motion?
Otra vez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll go back over what's written down and what AJ agreed with, and then I'll have to fumble through what AJ suggested as an alternative. But the motion would be to approve with conditions development application DP 23-0048, a design review for 116 townhomes in a single phase on 4 existing vacant parcels in the Monte Vista subdivision, and approve with conditions development application DP 23-0047, a request for a tentative subdivision map to create building envelopes for the townhomes and dedicated common areas on a total of 9.49 acres, and direct staff to examine other proposed conditions before presentation to the Board of County Commissioners, and recommend the Board of County Commissioners implement parking restrictions on Monte Vista Avenue. Is that close to what you think works, AJ?
AJ Haim from District Attorney's Office, yes, I think that's fine.
Thank you. Oh, and I'm sorry, Bryce pointed out to me, we need to have the standard language at the conclusion of that, based on the staff report and the ability to make the required findings.
All findings have to be met, and I still feel E is not being met.
Paul, do you second that?
I do second what Commissioner
We have a
Walter
motion and a
described.
second. Discussion. David?
Just that E in the findings is not being met, in my opinion, and I can't vote for this motion.
Ken, you have something to say? Bryce? No? I have just a comment, an observation, and then we can go to a vote. I walked this neighborhood yesterday, and a couple of observations that were made earlier. A lot of them were from the public comment letters that we received over the last week. Yes, there are a lot of cracks in the street with weeds growing up in them. The streets are the property of the town of Minden, so those issues need to be taken up with the town of Minden. And it appeared to me that all the streets in the neighborhood are the same width, and there are cars parked on both sides of the street. The difference between the streets in La Costa and Monte Vista is a collector street. And it does receive more traffic than the streets inside La Costa proper. And there are no speed limit signs on Monte Vista, so I do believe there should be, starting on Monte Vista and then coming in from Muller. There should be speed limit signs. And I was very concerned walking on Jake's, the area behind the homes on Bella Rosa, that the shrubs and the trees look like they've been hacked. That the property owners, I can't think of anyone else, have been cutting back the trees because they interfere with views. That's how it appears to me, whether or not that's true, but that's how it appears. There are 3 large conifers, 4 actually, that are all in the same state of death, for a better word, that look like they've been poisoned. And I reported it to the town manager, and they were going to send arborists out to see if somebody's been tampering with the trees. Because if the trees are not there, the homes that they are behind would have a great view of the mountains. and I find that to be appalling. It is shameful because, one, that's vandalism, and two, that is destruction of public property. The wetland is there for the enjoyment of the entire town of Minden, not for the residents of that section of Bella Rosa to enjoy views. And it just is very distressing and disturbing and upsetting to have a handful of residents feel that they can destroy public property on a whim because they want a better view. So I hope that these words are taken seriously and know that you will be watched, whoever is destroying those trees and those shrubs and those bushes, because I am very distressed about it, and this tape is being watched by others. And I hope the neighborhood will start watching as well. And thank you, Rob, for taking our considerations and our conditions seriously. Yes, the trash pads for the hammerhead and the conditions that we have imposed on the project, and for listening to the concerns that the residents had and answering their questions. Thank you, planning commissioners, for all your comments. And thank you, neighbors, for showing up and expressing your concerns. We like it when the public actually gets involved and pays attention to what's going on in their neighborhood. So on that, if there are no other comments from the planning commissioners, we will go for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against?
Nay.
No.
Nay. And Ken, you did not express which finding you take exception with.
E.
D? Okay.
No, it was E. It was
E is the-
Dave's.
David is E, and Ken is E. So we have Kirk, Bryce, the chair, Maureen, and Paul voting aye on the project. David and Ken voting nay based on finding E. Thank you all. We will now open for closing public comment. Please come to the microphone and state your name for the record if you have closing public comment. Seeing no one rise, I will close public comment. And
Madam Chair, before you adjourn the meeting, I do want to thank staff again for a wonderful job. Linda, I know this is your first time preparing and presenting before the Planning Commission, and you did an outstanding job, and I wish you the best of success with the Board of County Commissioners and further projects. And again, echoing Bryce's and Maureen's comments, the public comments are very important, and we appreciate all of you attending today and voicing your opinions. So thank you.
And David, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments at the beginning of the meeting. And I will adjourn this meeting of the Douglas County Planning Commission at 3:35 p.m.